if you ask me, Wolfgang, what do you prefer, going shopping at Neiman Marcus or to the farmer's market? There's no doubt I will go to the farmer's market. So for me, our cooking is all about the ingredients. If we get the best ingredients and then don't mess them up, we're going to have good food.
Welcome to Rodeo Drive, the podcast, the show about the visionaries who keep 3 blocks in Beverly Hills at the forefront of fashion and culture. I'm Kathy Gohari with the Rodeo Drive Committee.
I'm Lyn Winter, your host for this episode, and I'm thrilled to talk with Wolfgang Puck, legendary chef, restaurateur, and caterer to the stars. Today, his empire spans more than 27 restaurants around the globe, cookware, wine and coffee lines, best-selling cookbooks, and a documentary film. But Wolfgang wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth, and he met plenty of challenges along the way. He joins us here to share his amazing story, here on Rodeo Drive at Cut Lounge at the Beverly Wilshire. Wolfgang, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here. I mean, that's my home here on Rodeo Drive at the Beverly Wilshire.
I love that. And I don't know you so well. Can I call you Wolf or Wolfie?
Wolf is perfect,
Wolf,
yeah.
Okay. So, Wolf, take us back to the beginning where it all started in a rural village in Austria.
Exactly. I was born in a small town, and we lived next to the town in a small village with 2 farmers and 4 houses, and we had no electricity, we had no indoor plumbing in the house, and I had a stepfather who was terrible, very abusive, both emotionally and physically, to my sister and myself and everything. So at the beginning, I didn't really think I'm going to be a cook, but my mother was a chef also in a hotel. So I wanted to be an architect, but there was only one school in Vienna where I could go to, and that was too expensive. We didn't have the money, so my mother found me a job in a little hotel 50 miles away from where I grew up. And, you know, my stepfather always told me I was good for nothing. And, you know, and when I told him I'm going to go start cooking, he said, cooking is for women, that's not for men. You should be a carpenter or a mason or something like that. And I didn't listen to him, and he told me when I left with my little suitcase, he said, oh, in 1 month you're going to be back and begging for money and, you know, and so forth. So, and I told him I'm never coming back. So I started to work in this little hotel, and the chef was as crazy as my stepfather. And one Sunday, like 2 months into my apprenticeship, I was 14 years old. I didn't go to high school, so only middle school. And we ran out of potatoes and mashed potatoes, and naturally they told me it was my fault. I had no idea how much we needed really of potatoes or whatever. So, and the chef called me over and says, you know, you're good for nothing. You better go back home to your mother. And I was saying, you're fired. And he went on and on yelling like crazy, like in the old times the chefs did. And so I said, you know, I'm not going home. So that night, I stood on the bridge over the river. There was a big river going through the town there. And I said, I'd much rather kill myself than going back home. So I was standing on the bridge there, looking down in the dark water and thinking what will happen, you know, if I jump in there. And will I go to heaven or to hell or whatever? And then all of a sudden, like an hour into it, I said, you know, maybe I'm just going to go back tomorrow and he's going to change his mind or something. So I couldn't sleep all night. In the morning at 7 o'clock, I went back to the hotel, and the apprentice who was ahead of me was so happy to see me, because if not, he would have to peel potatoes and onions and all that stuff again for another 6 months. And so he said, why you don't just go down in the vegetable cellar and I bring you some soup or some sandwich or whatever to eat, and you peel the potatoes and the onions and everything. So I was down there maybe for 2 weeks or so. And then finally the chef came down and saw me sitting there peeling potatoes, and he starts screaming and yelling and cursing me off, and then trying to grab me, and I was holding on to the potato bags and screaming also, but then I couldn't care less. I said, I'm never going home, I'm not going home, and I went on, and then he really didn't know what to do, so he called the owner of the hotel and says, I don't know what to do with this little shit there. And, you know, he is yelling back, and he doesn't know, he doesn't want to leave and so forth. So And I told him to go home. He fired me, and the owner had a little bit more empathy. He sent me to another hotel they owned there, and there was a woman who was the chef, and she said, just be quiet and do your job, and you will be fine. And sure enough, I didn't talk much. I just did what I had to do, and that was it. And, at that time, even I was 14 years old, I started at 8 in the morning until 2:30 in the afternoon, and from 5 to 10 every day. And once in a while, they said, okay, tomorrow you're off. That was it.
Enchanté.
When my apprenticeship was over, I wrote them in France, and I said, can I come to do a stage in Dijon, in that restaurant? And they accepted me. So I took a French teacher. I said, at least I have to learn a few words in French.
And you speak French?
Yeah, now I speak French. I lived there for a long time. So, but I learned French a little bit. So I went to this restaurant in Dijon, took the train. It took us a day and a half to go with the train from where I came from. And then I arrived there. I was so nervous, I forgot all the French I learned. And I knew how to say bonsoir. And I showed them the letter they wrote me. And then I started to work there. And about a year into the job, I started to speak French already pretty well. I used to read the French newspapers all the time and everything to learn. And then the owner gave a party for all the employees. And because the restaurant received 1 star in the Guide Michelin, I had no idea what the Guide Michelin was. The way they were speaking in the restaurant, they said, Dijon is the capital gastronomique of France, and we are the best restaurant, and they went on and on and on. And so I took the red book, looked through it, and then I found out we had 1 star, but I found out there was a 2-star restaurants, there were 3-star restaurants. So I said, I'm not going back to Austria until I work in a 3-star restaurant. So I wrote to Bocuse and Trois Gros and La Tour d'Argent, all the famous 3-star restaurants. And then one restaurant called Beaumanière, and the owner was Raymond Tullier, he gave me a favorable response and accepted me. And I told him, you don't have to pay me if I don't work well enough. So I took the train down to Provence and to Avignon. And then they picked me up at the train station, and I started to work there. And that really changed my life there.
And he became a real mentor for you.
Yeah, he became my real mentor. He was the first one who saw something in me. Like I was working next to him doing the sauces and so forth. And I wasn't scared of him or anything, because when I cooked something, I made a sauce for the Daubasol or something. And he tasted it and said, okay, put a little more salt, a little lemon juice, a little this and that. And I said, okay. And then when he made something, he made me taste it too. And I said, a little more salt or a little more pepper. And he said, okay, let's put a little more salt and pepper. So he really trusted me, because I wasn't telling him, oh, it's delicious, like all the other young guys did. So he took me under his wing, and it helped. We had the best materials there, the best ingredients there.
I mean, Beaumanière has amazing gardens, right? With amazing vegetables. Produce.
So we had great vegetables, berries, melons, apricots, the green beans as tiny as they could be, and so everything tasted so amazing. The fish came right, the rouget and everything from Marseille. So, and the 3-star service and everything. So it was a whole different experience. And I remember also we had a lot of famous people come there. Like I remember Tullier brought Elizabeth Taylor in the kitchen, and George Pompidou, who was then the Prime Minister or President of France, and a few other, like Catherine Deneuve, I remember. And so I said, I want to be like him. I want to own my own restaurant one day. And so I stayed 2.5 years there. Then I went to Beaulieu-sur-Mer, and I didn't really like it. I didn't like it that much. And then the immigration came and said I have to leave the country.
Oh, they did?
Yeah. So it was funny, because the chef was a nice guy, and he says, don't worry, I find you a job in Monaco. Monaco is right next
and
to Beaulieu.
You went to the Hotel de Paris?
Yeah, so I went to the Hotel de Paris and worked there, and I didn't really like it so much. And then Mr. Tullier found me a job in Paris. I went to Maxim's in Paris. And there I had a friend who was working in Chicago at Maxim's, and he told me, you have to go to America. You make so much more money there. It's so much better, and don't waste your time in France. he went on and on. Although I loved Paris, it's a beautiful city, and I was the night chef by then at Maxime's. I was the number 3 guy, and I was only like 23 years old, 24 maybe. And so finally, through this friend, I got a job in New York.
Right.
And then I packed my little bags, sold my car, and took the Air France plane and went to New York, and didn't know where to stay, what to do. So I checked into a hotel with full of cockroaches, and everything was not a nice place, but it was cheap. And then I went to the restaurant where I was supposed to work, but that was like a little bistro. I didn't really like it. It was famous at that time already, called a Goulu. And I said, no, I worked in all these 3-star restaurants. I want to have a real restaurant. And like by accident, I went to La Grenouille, and I met Georges Maison, who was the owner at that time of the restaurant on 52nd Street. And he says, no, don't work in a bistro like that. You worked in all these fancy restaurants, 3-star restaurants. You have to work in a really upscale restaurant. He called his friend in Chicago, and he said, no, I don't need anybody in Chicago, but I need somebody in Indianapolis. And so I thought, Indianapolis, because I love auto racing, and Monaco has the big race, and so does Indianapolis. The 500 miles of Indianapolis are world famous.
But not really a culinary center.
Not a culinary center at all, but they're famous for a week when they have the race. And so I took the Greyhound bus and went to Indianapolis and said, shit, that's Indianapolis. I thought it's going to be a little bit like Monaco or something like that, but it was at that time...
Very, very different from Monaco.
A very different place, yeah.
And from Provence as well.
Yeah, totally. All flat there, and at that time they didn't have restaurants or anything, it was really a sad place, but I couldn't leave. I had no money, so I started to work there. After a year, I got my green card, and then I moved out to California.
And how did you get started in L.A.? How did all that happen?
So I had a job. The same company who I worked for in Indianapolis, they had a restaurant downtown in L.A., so they gave me a job there. And it was funny because I was like the night chef in a restaurant. They had an executive chef because there were like 4 or 5 restaurants in the building. And he could not cook. So I remember one time we were doing a wine dinner or something. And he did something, I did something, and where the Japanese chef did a course or whatever for the tasting. And they sent us a letter after, said, okay, the second course was great, the third course was great, but the first course was unedible. And it was the chef who did it. And he was like this big guy, like an Arnold Schwarzenegger type guy. And so I was laughing at him. I was laughing at, the first one, I wonder who made it. I made a little joke, and he did not appreciate it. But through another chef I knew, I found this restaurant called Ma Maison, which was almost bankrupt then. So I started to work there, and...
that was really the start of everything, right?
Yeah, it was the start for me in L.A. And, the restaurant, I remember my first paycheck bounced. So the restaurant, everything was on COD. So if I didn't pay for it, they took their merchandise back. I went downtown to the fish market and bought lobster shells because some other big restaurant bought the lobster meat. And so, but little by little, we moved up.
And it had like plastic chairs.
Yeah, it had plastic chairs, astroturf on the floor. Yeah, and then it became
processed meats in the fridge, right?
Yeah, when I started, it was terrible. You didn't want to go in the refrigerator. It was so sad, But I changed it and went to the farmers market, and I went to the downtown market, and went to the fish place and bought a little bit. But I prepared it well the way I did it in. The 3-star restaurant. So,
and why do you think it was such a success? It was a...
Well, I don't know. If you could bottle it, I would just sell it and sit here and talk and drink. There's no real reason. The timing, the people, and everything fell into place. Yeah. And, it wasn't fancy, but the food was good. And it felt like California in a way, a little cheesy California, because of the plastic chairs and astroturf and... funny roof on top, but people loved the food, and it became really one of the top restaurants in the country. Yeah. But I always wanted to be on my own. I always wanted to write my own check. So little by little, I was thinking I have to open my own restaurant. But I felt guilty. That was at the height of Ma Maison. You know, we had all these famous people from Orson Welles to Jack Lemmon and Jackie Collins and Joan Collins, and all these people used to come to the restaurant. And I felt bad leaving, so I told Patrick, you know, we have to start a new restaurant company where I own half and you own half. At that time, I already found the place up on Sunset. And I explained him what I wanted to do and so forth. And he looked at me and says, you know, I always going to own 51%. And then I said, well, me too. So that was the end. So I had to leave after 3 months or so. I left, or even before. And then he talks really badly about me and said, Wolfgang is opening a pizza joint or a spaghetti joint and so forth. And then in 82 in January, I opened Spago, and we never looked back since.
And you opened that with Barbara Lazaroff, your former wife, and it was really a restaurant that changed dining in LA forever. Tell us.
Okay, so when we were opening the restaurant, so I said, I want a restaurant where I can manage the restaurant from the kitchen. I don't want to be in the background. So we built the kitchen in the middle of the restaurant, just like a stage. And it was easy for me to see who is coming in, what's going on. So, and for the guests, it was some new experience, you know. The restaurant wasn't formal at all. All that was formal was what was on the plate. You know, we bought the best ingredients. I went down to the Chino farm, got fresh vegetables and corn and melon and strawberries and everything. And people never had vegetables which tasted that well, that good.
And Barbara was really the designer, right? She created this.
Barbara designed the restaurant totally. I remember we raised $500,000.
And it was different investors, right?
Yeah, with different investors. I was the biggest investor.
Dentist, wasn't it a dentist?
A few dentists, a few shrinks, a few lawyers, and so forth, like 15 people. And I remember I invested $60,000, which at that time was a lot of money. I didn't have it, but a banker loaned me the money, and a friend of mine had to co-sign it and everything. So we started then the restaurant. I was on a cookbook too. I wrote my first cookbook for Ma Maison and made a little money that way. And I went all over the United States selling cookbooks and doing radio shows and TV shows and everything. And by January, the restaurant was finished. We opened up, and I had many sleepless nights. And I said, what about if nobody shows up? Everybody going to laugh at me, and I'm going to have to leave town and so forth. But
it was an immediate success, right?
The first night we opened up, and I don't know, we didn't have a lot of reservation, but somehow people knew we were opening, and all of a sudden I looked around, the restaurant was full. And then I remember a week or 2 weeks later, George Christie, he used to write for the Hollywood Reporter, came and with some old movie stars and everything. So, and then he wrote like the best article and the first article the next day, and he told everybody, you better remember the phone number and make a reservation now. If not, you will never get a table there. So, and that started then everybody from Hollywood had to come, because that was really the Bible of everybody in Hollywood. The first thing they read was the Hollywood Reporter in the morning, and then there was a page at the end called The Great Life by George Christie, and that was, for us, more important than any food critic review.
And you could barely get a table. There was jockeying for tables, right?
Yeah,
it became a real thing at the restaurant.
The problem was, the way the restaurant was the back and the front, so everybody wanted the window seats. There were like maybe 6 tables at the windows, what everybody wanted, and people used to get crazy if they couldn't get their table, and they always said, this is my table, and this and that. So
and how did you keep on top with who was who and who should sit with who?
Yeah, it was very difficult. It was very difficult to do that, you know, and sometimes people got upset, and then they got over it. And I told him, it's just a table. You get the same food. You sit next to it. What's the big deal?
And you had like an area called Siberia, which was the chili patio, right?
Well, the back of the restaurant. At that time, we didn't even have a patio. It was still in the kitchen. It was on the back, in the back of the restaurant. And I still remember Tony Richardson came with Jack Nicholson, and they sat in the back because he didn't want to be in the middle. And so I had to tell everybody, well, Jack Nicholson likes the back better. And then some people said, I like the front. And some people said, okay, then I want to sit there too.
And you were even giving people pizza on the stairs when they were waiting,
Yeah,
right?
I remember we took reservation, which didn't mean anything. I remember one time Lionel Richie came with Jimmy Connors, and we didn't have a table, and they were waiting and waiting, and then finally I said, why don't you sit on the stairs going upstairs? And I fed them, I made a pizza for them, gave them some cocktails, and they were hanging out and looking out on the dining room.
Great. So what about the smoked salmon pizza? I mean, were it not for Joan Collins, would that have ever been invented?
Who knows how things happen? Sometimes things happen by accident. Sometimes things happen when you do things. It still could have happened, maybe not that day, maybe another day. But we were making our own smoked salmon. It was very successful and served it traditionally with, creme fraiche and dill and onions and lemon and so forth. And Joan used to like it because it was like they do it in England. They cut it really thin and everything. So one night she came late and with a group of people, and she ordered the smoked salmon. And then we ran out of bread and brioche, and we had nothing left. So I said, oh, my God, we cannot go to a store now. It's 11 o'clock at night. So I cooked some pizza dough, and which was like bread. It was like a simple bread dough. And then cut it into wedges and send it out with it. And while I was doing it, I said, okay, now I'm going to make cook one pizza dough with the onions, the olive oil, and then so it gets nice and crispy on the bottom. And then I put the dill cream on it, and then smoked salmon, some chives, and some caviar. I cut it, and I told the waiter, bring me a glass of champagne. So I had a glass of champagne and my first smoked salmon pizza. And I said,
it was
wow,
fabulous, right?
This is a perfect marriage, yeah.
So after catering to all these stars, you made a decision that surprised people at the time to democratize access to your food. What was that first product that you started with?
It was funny because at the beginning, Johnny Carson used to come to the restaurant all the time. And then one day, on Friday, he used to come and take like 8 or 10 pizzas home. And one day I asked him, Johnny, what are you doing with all these pizzas? And he says, I put them in the freezer, and when I play cards with my friend late at night, I have my houseman put in the pizza in the oven, and we all love it. So I said, what? You're freezing my pizza? I'm not going to give you my pizza anymore. He said, no, it's good. And so then I tried it out myself. And then I cooked it so that way when you finished baking it, I cooked it half, so when you finished baking it, it was good. And then with a doctor friend, at that time at least, we were supposed to start a food company, frozen food for heart healthy, because he was a cardiologist. So he said, if we can make food with no salt, just spices and things like that. And then I said, no. Why do that? If people like our pizza, why we don't make frozen pizza? So
absolutely.
We started to serve or sell frozen pizzas to some stores like San Vicente Food and Gelson's and so forth. And also we made some frozen desserts. And
now your products are airports, grocery stores, everywhere, right?
Yeah, we do a little bit of everything. I get excited about everything. And so I think I don't stop. We always do different things. So I think to me, continuing doing what you love to do, and when you're passionate about it, that's what life is all about.
Absolutely. And you love coffee, and you created a coffee line, and you have all these great names: Breakfast in Bed, Jamaica Me Crazy, even Rodeo Drive, right?
Absolutely.
And you made a commitment to sustainable practices with your coffee.
We were always into that. Since the beginning, I always supported the local farmers. And like I used to drive all the way to Rancho Santa Fe to the Chino farm to pick up vegetables. Even this morning, I was at the farmer's market. I still love it. To me, if you ask me, Wolfgang, what do you prefer, going shopping at Neiman Marcus or to the farmer's market? There's no doubt I will go to the farmer's market. So for me, our cooking is all about the ingredients. If we get the best ingredients and then don't mess them up, we're going to have good food.
going back to your childhood, I saw this amazing photograph of you with your mother with these armfuls of vegetables from the kitchen garden. So what were you cooking with in Austria? Because it's the same thing. You went from like the Austrian gardens to Provence to California.
You know, for me it was totally normal to go in the garden. You know, not in the winter we had snow, but during the spring and summer and fall, whatever we had, if we wanted salad, I never saw my mother went to a store and bought salad.
Yeah, amazing.
You know, they grew them, if it was peas or if it was carrots or cauliflower or potatoes. So we had that in the garden. You know, we had a lot of potatoes because during the winter time we ate a lot of potatoes because there was no fresh green beans and so forth. In the summer, we went up in the forest because we were very close to the forest. A few hundred yards up the hill was the forest. And we went and picked strawberries, wild strawberries, and raspberries, and blackberries, and blueberries, mushrooms, you name it. So that's what we were eating. And I never felt deprived. You know, we ate meat once a week, maybe on Sunday for lunch, but I never felt bad. My mother was a good cook, and, you know, for us, she made for dinner like palachinka, which are these tin crepes with marmalade in it and rolled and with a little powdered sugar and a glass of milk, and I was happy, or Kaiserschmarrn or things like that.
Fabulous. So your success in Hollywood led to a unique catering role at the pinnacle of the entertainment industry. So I think it's 29 years now that you've been cooking for the
Oscars.
Governor's Ball. Yes, tell us about that.
Yeah, well, we used to do a big Oscar party at Spago.
Right.
Irving Lazar, Swifty Lazar, was a famous agent, and he threw this Oscar party where everybody went, every big star, but no other people.
It was like private party, right?
Totally private, yeah. And so when he passed away, and the Academy hated him because all the stars went to him, they never went to their party, you know. So when he passed away, and they asked me again and said, Wolfgang, why you don't try to do our thing? And I said, wow, you know, this will be a challenge. I never cooked for 1,500 people. So, and I said, okay, as long as you let me do what I want. So I still remember one time we had the tasting, the first tasting we had. And I told our chef at the old Spago, I said, okay, this is what we're going to do tomorrow. And he prepared everything, and we had one of the designers or whatever, Cheryl, she came and said, Matt, that's all you're going to do? You're not going to give them a fish to taste? You're not going to give them a chicken to taste? That's how they do that. And he told her, I'm sorry, that's what Wolfgang told me to do. That's what we're going to do. So I went out and told him, you know, I will do your party if I can do what I want to do, because I know all these guys are our customers anyway, you know, all the movie people. And I said, you know, if I do what I want to do and you don't tell me what to do, I don't tell you how to make the movie, you don't tell me what to cook, and that was it. And they said, okay, and they were happy because they didn't have to choose. Before they used to get into fights. One wanted chicken, one wanted fish, one wanted steak, and so forth.
So many of your former Spago clients and these stars, they set the menu. So Barbra Streisand voted for the chicken pot pie, right?
Yeah.
John Travolta for the macaroni and cheese with truffles. Who else influenced the dishes? It's so interesting.
They didn't influence them. It was I influenced them. When I served it to them, they said, oh, my God, this is so delicious. And I remember Barbara telling me, you know, I'm coming to the Oscars. I hope you're going to make the chicken pot pie with truffles. And we still make it every year after 20 years or so.
And the chocolate Oscars, obviously,
and
are
the chocolate
infamous.
Oscars, it became like part of the whole deal. You know, it's so interesting that I said, we have to make a dessert, but it looks like an Oscar. So we made this chocolate cake and put the Oscar on top. And then we found out everybody took it and then put it in their pocket. And so then we said, okay, let's just give it to them wrapped up and they can take it home. So everybody gets an Oscar.
You've had quite a career since 1984 in TV and the movie world, with appearances in Frasier, The Simpsons, Keeping Up with the Kardashians. You were a judge on Hell's Kitchen and MasterChef, and you have your own documentary film. What was the most memorable role?
You know, I remember one time I did a show, one of the first ones, was with Tony Danza, who was a good customer, and I think it was called Who's the Boss or something like that. And I remember I was so nervous, and I didn't know there was an audience and everything. And it was like, for me, like I forgot the lines and everything. And I remember another time, I did a movie with Albert Brooks I played myself, called The Muse.
Right.
So Sharon Stone was next to me, and another lady next to me, and I forgot my lines. I was so nervous being next to Sharon Stone that I spoke in German. So that way Albert Brooks said, Wolfgang, we are doing the movie in English. We don't going to have German with English subtitles.
That's
I remember.
so
And I just was I was totally lost.
It's funny. And then you received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame for your work in how does that feel?
Well, I don't know if it's for a little TV I did. I had my own TV show on the Food Network, and I actually won the first Emmy for the Food Network. But it's not my passion, really, doing television or movies, because you have to wait around and wait and wait.
A lot of waiting.
Yeah, I remember, I did this thing with Jimmy Kahn. He had this show about Las Vegas. And they called me to the lot at 9 o'clock. So I sat there, read the paper, have a coffee and everything. And finally, by 12:30, we were still doing nothing. So I said, I'm going to Spago for lunch. If you need me, call me. So if we finished lunch, then I went back. By the time they put me on for a little bit, it was 6 o'clock at night. Yeah. So I said, this is terrible for me, a terrible waste of time sitting for 6 hours in my trailer. That was not fun. So I said, I do what I love to do. I love the restaurant business. I like cooking. I love the ingredients. I love the whole thing. And I love customers. I love people. So to me, that's really what I love to do. And at my age, I do what I want to do.
Exactly.
Unless my wife tells me anything else.
So we're at Cut in Beverly Hills. And obviously it's not Spago. So what spurred you to move from a, California cuisine to a steakhouse?
Well, I think when they offered me this space here at the Beverly Wilshire, which is one of the most famous hotels in the world, the movie they made here and everything. And so I thought, it's so close to Spago. I said, what am I going to do? It has to be different. I said, if I open a restaurant less expensive, like so many chefs do, they have one upscale restaurant, then the next one is less expensive, and I'm going to say, all our customers going to come here.
Right.
So then I thought, the steak restaurants, they're all so boring. They all have the same thing. So I said, maybe we make a restaurant with interesting meats and great wine list, but also wonderful appetizers and desserts and side dishes. And then a good friend of mine built the Getty Museum.
Richard
Meyer, yeah. So one day we are playing tennis at his house. He lived very close there in Brentwood. And I said, Richard, would you like to design a restaurant?
And he's not done many restaurants.
No, he didn't.
Maybe two, right, in his career.
Yeah, maybe. He did one for Jean-Georges in New York once after us, but ours was really the first one, I think so. And he said, yeah, why not? So he made, because I wanted the restaurant to be different than the hotel. I didn't want it to become like a hotel restaurant where the lobby and the restaurant and everything looks the same. That's what they do. They have one designer do the whole thing. And I didn't like it. I said, we have to have our own style, our own personality. And so he did the restaurant. It came out beautiful.
Beautiful.
So, and, it's timeless. And we have great art always. My wife, Galila, is in charge of all the artwork and all that things. So she had Chambalisari do all the paintings. And
amazing.
So,
it's beautiful space.
Yeah.
So whilst I'm at Cut, I have a dilemma, an LA dilemma. I'm a vegetarian.
It's okay. We have a lot of vegetable dishes too.
So how do I navigate your menu with my meat-eating friends?
Well, you just tell us if you're a vegetarian, we're always ready for you. I actually designed a plate for the vegetarians. Richard Meyer designed it. I asked him, I want a plate. So I said, okay, maybe in one a thing for four. So I could put 4 dishes because I want them to feel really good. So maybe in one we put a little risotto with mushrooms. In the other one we had a little pasta or something. In the other one we had an interesting vegetable dish. Maybe in the other one some asparagus, So we made it really appetizing for the people and interesting for the people who are not meat eaters, because I don't want anybody to be left out. And I like a lot of vegetable too, and we get the best one like from the Chino Ranch or these days from the farmer's market.
Yeah, and I saw you have that delicious cream spinach with the egg, right?
Yeah, that's
delicious.
That's from my childhood. You know, we had chickens at home, and we had spinach, but we had the wild spinach, the nettles, you know.
Amazing.
So we had to go rip the nettles and take off the leaves, and they were stinging at that time. It was so tough. And then my mother made a puree just like with regular spinach and the sauce and the bechamel and everything. And then, because we had a lot of chicken, we had the creamed spinach with 2 eggs on top, and that was it.
Fabulous.
That was our lunch. Or we went in the morning in the forest, picked chanterelles, you know, the yellow mushrooms.
Yes, I love them.
My mother chopped them up with some onions, some parsley, and then sauteed them, and then cracked a few eggs in there and continued cooking it. That was our lunch, maybe with a little salad out of the garden, and we were perfectly happy.
Delicious.
So we don't have to have meat only to be happy.
You know, it's funny, just as an aside, I once ate with Marco Pierre White early on in England. I think it was at Harvey's. He was horrified that I was vegetarian, and he kind of threw this plate on the table saying, "Here's your porridge." And it was actually a risotto, very good.
Yeah.
But he wasn't happy.
I wasn't happy. Yeah, I know. I was like that too. I remember when I was at Ma Maison, it had to be my way or the highway. I remember one time Warren Cowan came with Paul Newman, and I loved Paul Newman because he was a big race car guy too.
Yeah, it's true.
And they came, and I don't know who wanted a baked potato. And I said, I'm not making baked potato. I told the waiter, tell them to go to Laurie's. So they sent their driver to go to Laurie's to pick up some baked potato, and I cooked whatever I cooked. But I said, you know, it's my way or the highway. And people wanted sauce on the side. I said, you're not going to ask a painter to not paint it red. They do what they want, and you buy the painting. The same thing, you buy the dish. And, you know, it was difficult, and I was difficult. I remember we had Cat Stevens used to come to the restaurant, wanted to eat eggs for dinner. And I said, no, screw him. I'm not cooking eggs for dinner, you know. And so Patrick came in. Oh, Cat Stevens is so upset he doesn't get his eggs. Where it is? And I had them somewhere cooking. And I took them out, grabbed the eggs, and threw them against the wall. Patrick had the yellow on his face and the thing coming down. I said, here's your eggs.
Oh, my God. So funny.
Yeah, no, I was very difficult because I learned from other chefs to be like that. You know, that was the norm. When I was at Beaumanier, Tuilier, like if you sent something to the sauce station from the roasting station and it was not hot enough, he just took the silver casserole and slid it across. We had this central stove, and, you know, if you didn't duck or got out of the way, you got hit.
I think there's a lot of violence in the kitchens, right?
It used to be terrible. It used to be terrible.
With knives and everything.
Yeah, I mean, the chef who fired me, the first chef, used to slap everybody. We were 14-year-old boys and girls in the kitchen, and half of them were girls, and he couldn't care less if it was a woman or a man. Yeah. He just slapped you. I remember one time he slapped a girl, and the girl turned, and he hit her right on the nose. And, you know, obviously she was crying and blood coming down crazy. And we had these older waitresses, like 4 or 5 of them. They came out and put him in a corner. I thought they were going to kill him. It was like, I was so happy. I said, hopefully they slap him too or do something to him. He was like in the corner, like freaking out, didn't know what to do. But then they went to the owner of the hotel, said, you know what, this cannot happen. We're going to go to the press. We're going to make it known that he is beating people. And then I think it was a little better maybe for a while.
Crazy.
Yeah, it used to be totally, totally crazy in the kitchens, you know. And for what? Why? I don't know. You know, I always tell people, you know, if somebody screws up, for sure I get upset if it's the third time I tell them and they still don't do it right. But normally if they mess up something, I just show them how to do it the right way.
Right.
It's easier than yelling at them.
So Tokyo, you've mentioned, is one of your favorite places, and you've got several outlets in Japan. And Drew Rosenberg, the executive chef here at Cut, he has some experience in Japanese meat and fish, correct? Yeah. So how does that sort of sensibility and knowledge play into the menu at Cut?
I'm going to Japan since 1983. We opened Spago there in Roppongi. And I was always fascinated by the simplicity of Japanese food. You know, I said, shit, they serve raw fish with a little soy sauce, maybe a little cucumber flour next to it or whatever, but very simple. But it's delicious. You can eat it again the next day. So I was always very impressed. So when the Japanese called to open a Spago in Tokyo, I was all excited. I said, okay. And then I went to Japan often, like 4 or 5 times a year, and it was really always a great experience. And then later on, we opened some cafes and so forth in Japan. But to me, I still tell today my chefs, when they try to make food too complicated, I said, go to the best Japanese restaurant and see how simple it is. Yes, they have beautiful plates, but the rest is pretty simple. It's not complicated.
Yeah, the minimalism is beautiful.
And I like it that way.
So the restaurant industry in Los Angeles and around the world faced a huge challenge recently, the COVID pandemic. How did it affect you and your businesses?
Well, it affected the COVID affected all of us really a lot because we had to close down the restaurant. You know, here we were closed for 2 years, and then Spago we were closed for 1 year. And we did takeout and everything too.
And you built something outside?
Yeah, and then we built a huge tent. You know, I remember when I talked to Lily Bossi, who is our mayor here in Beverly Hills, and she asked me how much space we want for the tent and to build a tent, and everybody had like the sidewalk covered and everything. I said, oh, the whole street. And at that time was great because the thing was closed. The street was closed anyway. So she said, okay, just build it. So I think it costed me like $500,000 to build the tent, but it helped us a lot to stay open, to keep the staff and everything. Whereas here we had to be closed because we didn't have a tent. And the outside was not very attractive, and in between the two buildings is too windy, there's too much of a current, air current. So I think at Spago it actually was bigger than before with the tent outside.
Right. So back to food and then family. So your stepfather was clearly a force in your life, negative and also perhaps in hindsight positive, but you also had a group of amazing women around you. Can you talk a little bit about them?
Well, I think I'm lucky that, my mother was an angel. You know, I don't know why she married my stepfather. I don't know what he did, if he was that good in bed or whatever. You know, I don't know. I never asked her. So. But I told her many times, you should divorce him and come here to America, but she never did. So I felt bad for her because he was crazy. So that was like the yin and the yang. My mother was an angel and my stepfather.
Did she protect you from him?
You know, she was gone 6 months out of the year cooking.
I see.
So I was at home with my grandmother.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
okay.
The only one who stood up to him was my grandmother. You know, she took a kitchen towel and hit him with the kitchen towel and said, get out of the kitchen and everything. And he didn't know what to do. But with us, with the kids, he took his belt off, he took the garden hose and hit us with anything.
Oh, my God.
So I think he was really terrible. And then, you know, the first woman who was a chef, and then it went okay. And then later on, I think, I married Barbara in 1984.
And she was a real force in creating that
design. She created Spago.
Yeah.
She built Spago. She built Chinois, and she built Eureka and some of the cafes we had and everything. She definitely had her own style, and I couldn't tell her what to do, which was very difficult, and it created a big friction. Part of it was because
two great creatives, right?
Yeah, but you have to work to a common thing, and we could not agree on a common thing. So then we got divorced in 2000. And then in 2007, I married Galila, who is also very opinionated and in fashion, and she runs our marketing and she runs our branding. So, and also oversees, like if we do a new design or things like that for restaurants, like we are remodeling Spago now a little bit. It's coming up. in the summer, and so she's overseeing it. So because I said I have good taste in women, but not in design.
So it's interesting that at the peak of your success, you were estranged from your family, and at times they didn't know where you were, and you were cooking for your Hollywood family. But now your family has taken center stage again. You have your son Byron. He's in the business, and he's set to take over. How is that, working together with him?
You know, it was very exciting. So I have 4 sons.
Right.
The oldest one is a professor. He's the first one who got a PhD. He lives in Boston, and I just became a grandfather a few months ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So, and then my second son, Byron, went here to Harvard Westlake, just like Cameron. And he only wanted to go to one school, was Cornell. They have a famous hospitality management school there.
Right.
But already before that, he loved to be in the kitchen. So I remember when he was 16, we just talked about it. I said, Byron, how old were you when I sent you to London to work at Nobu in London and some other place? And he said, 16. I was in high school. I said, wow, I forgot that. I thought you were 18 at least. So I sent him to London. I remember he got mugged and called me up. Said, Papa, I got mugged in the street. I said, well, be careful where you walk, you know. Don't walk around like a loose guy. And so then after Cornell, during the time he was at Cornell, I sent him to Spain and to Paris, and he worked in different restaurants. And then he worked at Spago in the dining room for a year. And then he opened up Miroir at the Pantry.
Right.
Which became a super successful restaurant. It was his first job as manager, and I remember he used to call me, Papa, what should I do? I said, you figure it out, you know, and I hung up. So he said he couldn't sleep all night. He said, I don't want to disappoint me or disappoint the people there. So it was very difficult for him, but he learned a lot. So, and it gave him great confidence. But last year, after 1.5 years doing Miroir, I sent him back to Europe to cook. So he went to Beaumanière for 4 months. And he went also cooking in Vienna at Steyrerek, which is the best restaurant in Vienna, and cooked there for 3 months. So I told him he has to learn a little bit the roots.
Fantastic. And what about the other 3 sons? Are they interested in cooking?
So then the first one is a professor.
Right.
Yeah, he's married, and it's actually his wife makes the money because she went to Harvard Business School and works for McKinsey. So she has a great job there. And then Byron is working with me, hopefully taking over one day. And then I have Oliver and Alexander. Oliver is in 11th grade, Alexander is in 10th grade.
Right.
So Oliver wants to be in the music business. And Alexander said, well, maybe I study marketing and maybe business. We'll see.
So maybe they'll all end up in the business.
They're running the whole business,
Exactly. And so when you're a family together at home, what's your favorite thing to cook and eat together?
You know, I really like to cook with the kids, which doesn't happen often enough, but I think it's really nice when everybody does the thing, like we make a risotto, one is chopping their onions, one is doing this, and I supervise and tell them, okay, cook a little more, a little longer, a little less, or whatever. So I think that's really fun because I really want the children to enjoy the process of cooking, that it shouldn't be a chore, it should be fun. And as long as we have somebody to clean up, then it's okay.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, your accomplishments are extensive and seemingly boundless. Do you ever want to stop and just enjoy what you've done?
I think I enjoy life by doing things. So for me to sit back, and my wife often says, why we don't just sell everything and, take it easy? Yeah. I said, I will get bored and probably I will get sick and die if I wouldn't have a purpose. I think for me, to having purpose in life, to doing new things is exciting. Like in 2 weeks, I'm going to Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. We are opening over there.
Fantastic.
Right now we are building, I think my wife is working with Frank Gehry to build a restaurant on the beach, which is Gladstone now. So we're going to tear it down and build a new building. It's always interesting to do new things in different places and learn new things. And for me, it's about learning, keeping my interest up, and being involved. And I think that's what I love. Like I remember 5 years ago, 5 years ago probably, the Wall Street Journal did an article on me, and they talked about, about the business and this. And they said, so Wolfgang, what are you still dreaming about? Or what is in your dreams? And I said, my dream is really to go to Harvard. And I said it as a joke, I never went to high school or whatever. And then a few days later, when the article came out, the dean of Harvard Business School calls me and said, Wolfgang, when you want to come? And I started the way. I said, well, so I never went to college, And he said, that's okay. And then I said, but you have a business. And I said, but I never went to high school either. And he said, well, but you run a pretty big business. I read about you, So then he said he has the perfect thing for me, the perfect program. It's called OPM, Owner President's Management. And it's 3 times a month over a 2-year period. So you stay there in the school, stay in the dormitory and everything. So it was very interesting for me. And my daughter-in-law went there for 2 years for graduate school. I only went for a little bit, but they do all these case studies. And they also did a case study on me. So it's very exciting.
What's next in cooking for the next generation? Like, what do you think is the sort of future of the way we sort of eat? And I mean,
well, I think it will continue this relationship between the producers of food and the people who do the cooking and giving it to the guests. That there's a really good relationship, because I think that's really the most important part. And I know not everybody can afford to go to the farmer's market and buy a little thing of strawberries and spend $12, And but I think we have to support the small farms, and we have to support the fishermen, and we have to support people who are really good at what they do. And, if it's a baker who makes great bread, we buy the bread. I know it's more expensive than factory bread, but I think it's also so much better.
Absolutely.
So I think cooking gonna go also a little bit more in the healthy way, because I think more and more we know what is good for us and not so good for us. Like for me, for example, I love sweets more than anything. But when I eat too much sugar,
it's not good.
I get inflammation and I feel lousy and everything. And if I don't eat the sugar, I feel so much better.
And you've expanded into the healthcare space. You have some arrangements with hospitals, right? The cancer hospital in Ohio
in Cleveland,
and Rochester.
Uh-huh.
I mean, very interesting. Art's obviously always been
I think it's mainly for, like, our cafes at these hospitals are really great for the people who come and visit the patients, or if a patient, has something not so bad, he can go and get a good salad and get maybe a good pizza or whatever they like, and get something more than hospital food, because we know hospital food is very boring. But also for the doctors, the nurses, and everybody, for them to have a nice meal, it's an important part.
Well, Wolfgang, thank you so much. Such a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.
Congratulations on an incredible success and bringing us all closer to the land through the extraordinary produce that we have on our doorsteps here.
Thank you so much. Glad to see you here at Cut, and hopefully you come and eat our vegetables here.
I would love to, actually. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wolfgang Puck has earned 3 Michelin stars. He is a James Beard award-winning restaurateur, and in June 2022 he was recognized by the International Hospitality Institute as one of 100 most powerful people in global hospitality.
Rodeo Drive, the podcast, is presented by the Rodeo Drive Committee with the support of the Heyman family, Beverly Wilshire, a Four Seasons hotel, and the Beverly Hills Conference and Visitors Bureau. This episode was hosted by Lyn Winter. I'm Kathy Gohari with the Rodeo Drive Committee. Join us on Instagram at Rodeo Drive.